I grew up knowing my life wasn't my own. From the moment I was born, I was raised to fulfill a role that was far from mine. The etiquette lessons, the protocols, the balls and receptions, everything was structured to ensure that at the right moment I would be presented as the princess everyone expected, impeccable, composed, always worthy of the position my father, the king, demanded I occupy. My existence was a predetermined path, a story written by others, and all I had to do was play it as best I could. My name, Selene Amaris, was a jewel laden with meanings I barely understood. To the kingdom, to my father, to everyone around me, I represented stability, power, and political alliances. An arranged marriage, a strategic union with a prince from distant lands. That was what was expected of me. I had never known what it was to be an ordinary woman, free from all this. I had never known what it was to feel something unaccepted, something unwelcome, until he came along. Alexander. He didn't belong to my world. He didn't have the noble name I was supposed to love, nor the prestigious position that would please my father or the court. He was just a knight, someone whose only value lay in protecting people like me, a silent shadow around me. But something happened when our eyes met for the first time, at that dazzling ball my family had organized to celebrate another victory in our political alliances. Amid the silk gowns and false smiles, there, among all the nobles and courtiers, it was as if time stopped. His gaze was direct, fearless, without the need to ask permission. And for some reason, in that moment, I felt seen in a way I never knew was possible. He didn't see me as the princess, with all her obligations and expectations. He saw me as a woman, with everything I carried, everything I wanted to hide. The world around us faded, and in his presence, there was a peace I had never experienced in my entire life. I knew it couldn't be, but I couldn't help it. I wanted him, and deep down, he wanted the same. Yet, I knew the cost. A princess couldn't afford such desires. The heart couldn't want what reason deemed impossible. And when our fingers touched for the first time, in a gesture that could be mistaken for a mere greeting, the world spun again, but I knew that touch was a silent pact, something I could no longer deny. I knew that love, this overwhelming feeling, would have to be hidden. It was a secret that burned within me, something so intense it made me question everything I knew about myself. But at the same time, it was the truest thing I had ever felt. And there, with him in the midst of a ball, among forced smiles and false pleasantries, I saw myself for the first time as free. Free to be who I truly was, not what the world wanted me to be. The princess with a secret, with an impossible love. The princess who, for the first time, no longer wanted to live by the rules imposed upon me. My meetings with Alexander became more frequent, but also more dangerous. Each moment we spent together carried greater risk, not just for me, but for him as well. A knight's fate is not the same as a princess's, and he knew it. But when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see fear. I saw understanding. He grasped what this meant to me. I was trapped between duty to my family, to my kingdom, and the desire to live something genuine, something not calculated or imposed. He made me feel things I never thought possible. And at the same time, the freedom he offered, this unexpected and sincere affection, also became my greatest prison. He never asked for anything beyond the time we spent together, but as the weeks passed, he began to look at me differently. Our meetings grew more intense, our words laden with unspoken meanings. I knew he was falling in love with me, and I with him. But at the same time, something within me constantly warned of the dangers of this love. The court, my father, everyone around me expected me to be a pawn to strengthen the kingdom. They didn't know my soul yearned for more. When I was with Alexander, the protocols dissolved. The weight of royalty became insignificant. I was just a woman longing to be loved and loving in return. But with each new meeting, my heart and mind grew more divided. On one hand, I felt unwavering loyalty to my family, to the responsibility of keeping our house's name intact. On the other, my love for Alexander burned like a flame that couldn't be ignored. I knew that if the truth were discovered, the scandal would be devastating. My position as princess, my arranged marriage to the prince, the carefully crafted image to ensure the kingdom's security, all of it would collapse in an instant. But as my love for Alexander grew, the pressure of duty became harder to bear. I found myself in an ever-widening dilemma. I loved a man who could never be mine, and at the same time, I was about to be given to another, a man I barely knew, who represented everything I didn't want to be. I was at my breaking point, on the verge of shattering between two worlds. Every time I looked at Alexander, my heart ached, knowing he would never be accepted by my father or the court. I wanted him, but I also knew that choosing him meant renouncing an entire life, a life I could never reclaim. Our secret meetings grew more tense. We both knew that at any moment we could be discovered, but we could no longer deny what we yet felt. Our moments together, though brief, became more precious, more intense. Alexander began to wonder, in his careful words and gestures, if I was ready to make a decision, if my love for him was strong enough to abandon everything my position demanded. I knew he was right. He didn't need to convince me of anything anymore. He already knew I loved him. But silently, I questioned whether I had the courage to do it. What would happen if I chose the life I truly wanted by his side and risked my honor, my name, my family? I didn't know. But every time he looked at me, every time our fingers brushed, the answer seemed clearer. Loving Alexander meant destroying everything I had known, but it also meant finally being who I truly was, not the princess everyone expected me to be. That night when I returned to the royal chambers, the palace felt colder, more distant. The walls that protected me also imprisoned me. I knew that by entering that castle, I was leaving behind the freedom to be myself, with all my insecurities and desires. But at the same time, I knew my fate was drawing closer to something I hadn't chosen. A loveless, soulless marriage, to a prince who would never touch my heart the way Alexander had. My body was there, but my mind and heart were miles away. They were with him, the man who made me feel like a real woman, not just a princess of lies. The marriage, inevitable, was approaching. My father, with his unrelenting gaze and constant expectations, spoke of alliances, commitments, how this union was essential for the kingdom's stability. His words passed through me like a cold wind, and I could no longer pretend they made sense. How could I marry someone I didn't see, didn't understand, didn't feel for? How could I continue being the princess everyone expected when deep down I was someone else? I didn't know what to do. The fear of losing control of my life, of risking everything for something that seemed impossible, paralyzed me. But at the same time, I knew living this lie was eating me alive, and there was no room left for duty when my heart had already made its choice. When I met Alexander that night, something in me broke. He was so calm, so resolute, as if he knew that with each passing day, our story was nearing a tragic end. He looked at me with eyes that had never lied to me, with an intensity that made me feel the truth in every word he spoke. You can choose, Selene. You can stay and fulfill your destiny, or you can come with me, live the life we choose together. But if you stay, something will die inside you. Those words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. He didn't need to say anything more. I already knew what was at stake. I knew the price of my choice. I walked through the silent night, the weight of decisions forming within me. Each step pulled me deeper into the darkness, further from the safe, familiar world. But at the same time, I felt a flame inside me, a flame Alexander had ignited, a flame that could no longer be extinguished. That night, in my chambers, with the moonlight streaming through the window, I made my decision. It wasn't an easy choice, nor one I made without fear, but it was the only one that made sense. I was tired of living for the will of others. I was tired of being a princess for the world and not a woman for myself. I would leave everything. I would leave the throne, the crown, the court's gazes, and my father's plans. I would choose freedom. I would choose Alexander. I would choose love, a love that, though forbidden, made me feel truly alive. But I knew this choice came with a cost. I would lose my name, my title, my family. I would have to live in the shadows, far from conventions, far from the duties imposed on me since birth. But at least I would live in truth. When I went to Alexander that night, my eyes full of tears and my heart brimming with courage, he embraced me, and in that embrace, I felt my life finally beginning to make sense. It didn't matter what the future held, because by choosing to be with him, by choosing to live what my heart screamed for, I was finally choosing myself. In the days following my decision, the feeling of walking a tightrope never left me. Each step seemed to pull me deeper into an endless abyss, and at the same time, an unfamiliar freedom enveloped me. I had chosen Alexander, and with that, I chose not only him, but a life I never knew I could have. A life free from the chains of royalty, from the court's watchful eyes, from the crushing expectations that had weighed on my shoulders since birth. But this love, this choice, also carried the weight of loss. Every day, I felt the burden of what I was leaving behind. My family, my kingdom, everything I had known, and all this to live a lie Alexander and I would have to carry alone, far from the eyes of those who expected more of me. In our secret meetings, Alexander seemed more distant, quieter, as if he carried the same weight I did. He loved me, I knew that, but he also knew every moment we shared was a risky choice. Fear was always there, lurking by my side, waiting for a mistake to be made and everything to be destroyed. He told me I shouldn't be afraid, that we were building something real, something worthwhile, but insecurity took root within me. How could I live a true life when everything around me was a lie? How could I love someone so deeply and still be forced to hide that love? With each day, my soul broke a little more. With every unspoken word, every furtive gesture, I felt more alone. The court began to notice my distance, my fake smiles, the way I looked at the prince my father wanted me to marry. They didn't. No, but they suspected something. And the more I tried to hide my pain, the heavier the gazes became, the more questions arose. My decision to live by Alexander's side was consuming me from the inside out, and I knew that soon, very soon, it could no longer be sustained. The marriage, which once seemed a distant formality, now approached with overwhelming force. Preparations were in full swing, dresses were being chosen, rings, receptions. Everything was being planned, but none of it felt real to me. I could no longer live in this fantasy. My mind was with Alexander, my thoughts were with him, and every step I took toward this marriage was torture. My father didn't suspect, but the tension between us grew. He saw the perfect princess, but I was just a woman full of doubts and a secret love coursing through my veins. What scared me most was that even with Alexander, I didn't know if this choice would be enough to make us happy. The future was uncertain, and though I loved him with all my being, I didn't know what to expect. Every time we talked about the future, he said we'd find a way, that everything would be all right. But deep down, I knew he was consumed by uncertainty too. He loved the princess I was, but he also knew that princess could never truly be his. He said we'd flee, start over, but I sensed he too feared how the world would see us. In the end, the pressure on us was stronger than either of us had imagined. It was during one of those afternoons that reality began to unravel. As Alexander and I walked through the forest, trying to find a space where no one could see us, I felt the threat of discovery closer than ever. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mix of anger, frustration, and deep sadness. "Can you live with this? With everything we're losing?" he asked, and the pain in his voice hit me hard. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know if I was willing to lose everything, if I was willing to live in a world where the love I felt for him was a condemned secret. More and more, I felt the pressure of choosing between the man I loved and the future imposed on me. I knew the wedding's end was nearing, and that the truth couldn't be contained much longer. The court was abuzz with the ceremony's approach, and the eyes on me were more than I could bear. One night, as I prepared for bed, doubt overwhelmed me. I couldn't keep living this way, with Alexander or with the prince. I could no longer lie to myself. I needed to make a definitive choice. What was I willing to lose to live the love I so desired? What was I willing to sacrifice to be truly happy? That night, I made my decision. I would find a way to make it work. It didn't matter what the kingdom thought. It didn't matter what my family said. I could no longer follow this path of falsehood. I couldn't follow through with this arranged marriage being a soulless princess. I knew that choosing Alexander would mean losing my position, my name, my family. But at least I could live truthfully without hiding my heart, without dying every day for not being who I am. I knew I was at my limit. The wedding was approaching with relentless speed, and with each passing day my heart tightened more. The court, the clothes, the prince. It all felt like a grand lie I had to live. I was tired of being a princess in appearance, tired of being a symbol of power and not a woman with feelings and desires. My love for Alexander, as wonderful and overwhelming as it was also a burden that made me question everything I had been taught, everything I was supposed to represent. I was being forced to choose between the life my father wanted for me and the life my heart screamed to live. That morning, decorated for a future she didn't want, she was about to follow a path that would pull her away from everything she truly felt. I looked at the tiara my father had given me, a symbol of my royalty, and felt it like a chain growing heavier by the second. Duty, the responsibility to keep the family united, the kingdom intact. That was what awaited me. But I didn't know how to move forward without losing my soul in the process. How could I live a life of lies, knowing I would never love the prince? How could I accept a future that wasn't by Alexander's side? I knew he loved me. I knew that if I chose to stay with him, the life we'd build would be full of challenges and uncertainties. But at least it would be true. At least it would be ours. But what about my father, my kingdom? How could I simply turn my back on everything I was raised to be? The internal battle I fought every day could no longer be ignored. Every day without a decision was another day my soul broke apart. That morning, as I walked through the castle corridors, unsure what to do with the feelings consuming me, I realized I had no more time. The wedding with the prince was approaching, and I was about to make a decision that would change my life forever. When I met Alexander again, everything seemed clearer. He looked at me with eyes that knew all my weaknesses, all my doubts, and said a single sentence that cut through the fog of my fear. "Choose, Selene. Choose the life you deserve, and come live freedom by my side." And in that moment, in the silence of his eyes, I knew I could no longer delay my choice. When the decision finally took shape within me, it wasn't like a grand revelation or a moment of triumph. It was a quiet sensation, as if suddenly all the weight I carried on my shoulders had vanished. The choice was made. I would no longer hide my heart. no longer let others decide what was best for me. The prince, the court, the castles, all of it vanished from my mind in that moment. I looked at Alexander and knew it was with him I should be. He didn't see me as a symbol or a figure of power. He saw me as a woman with all the flaws, fears, and desires that made me human. Choosing him didn't just mean choosing love. It meant abandoning an entire life, an identity built by my family, a future imposed on me before I was even born. I could no longer be the princess everyone expected, not when it meant living a lie. So, with a trembling hand, I placed it on my chest, and in a simple but definitive gesture said to him, "I'll flee with you, Alexander. Let's live what we could never live without looking back." The decision to flee wasn't easy or quick. Deep down, I knew there was more at stake than simply abandoning an arranged marriage or a life of wealth and status. I was leaving behind my family's protection, the comfort my royal position afforded, and stepping into an uncertain future. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't live in a golden prison with the key thrown into the depths of the sea. I needed to be free. And by making this choice, I realized that for the first time, I was choosing myself. The day of my departure approached. I knew there was great risk involved. The court was beginning to sense something was wrong, and the prince's eyes grew sharper. He noticed my distance, the way my heart was no longer there. But he didn't know how much he had already lost to him. The prince was good, a man many would believe was best for my future, but he wasn't the one I loved. I could no longer follow a life based on empty promises, on obligations that crushed me. A life with him would be a constant lie, and I couldn't submit to that. That afternoon, when I entered the room where I would meet Alexander to take the decisive step, I felt a mix of fear and excitement. I was about to leave for an unknown future, far from everything I knew. It was like jumping off a cliff, not knowing what lay below, but feeling that somehow there was freedom in the fall. Alexander looked at me with eyes full of tenderness and concern, as if he too was aware of what we were about to lose. But at the same time, there was a spark of hope, of courage, and he extended his hand. I knew what he meant. I knew what he was offering, not just love, but the possibility of starting over, of living a true life. When I finally left the castle that night, the weight of the decision I had made both crushed and freed me. I didn't know exactly where we were going or what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt I was doing something that deep down was just for me. As we walked through the dark forest, with only the stars and moon as witnesses, I felt my heart beat with a new rhythm, a rhythm no longer dictated by obligations, but by genuine desire. Each step we took pulled me further from everything I had been forced to be, and closer to the woman I had finally decided to become. The journey to the place where we settled was long and silent. There were no words for the magnitude of what we were doing. I didn't know what would come next. Fear, of course, was there. Fear of what my family would say. Fear of the political consequences. Fear that our escape would be discovered before we could get away. But when I looked at Alexander, I no longer felt the weight of fear. He was there, by my side, and in that moment, he was all I wanted. The love we shared wasn't something I could simply leave behind. He gave me the freedom I had always longed for, and at the same time, he became my anchor, the place where I finally felt at home. When we arrived at the village where we planned to start a new life, I realized the reality of our escape was far different from what I had imagined. Though we were together, life outside the castle was much harder than I had thought. The freedom we sought came with its own challenges. We lived with little, without the luxuries I was accustomed to, without the resources my former life provided. But as the days passed, I realized that though we were far from everything familiar, we were closer to what we had always sought: authenticity, sincerity, and the chance to live our love without lies, without masks. And then one day, a letter arrived. A letter from my father, my family, stating that the decision had been made. The marriage to the prince would be publicly dissolved, and my name would be stripped from the kingdom. They declared me a fugitive. It wasn't a surprise, but the impact hit me harder than I expected. My father, my mother, everyone I loved had abandoned me because of my choice. But as I held the letter, I read clearly what that loss meant. I had lost the princess everyone expected me to be. But in doing so, I found the woman I should have been all along. The woman who loved without fear, without regret, and who finally lived by her own choices. The pain of losing my family was deep, but with it came a sense of freedom, of truth. I knew my life with Alexander wouldn't be easy. There would be difficulties, there would be challenges, but for the first time, I was living for myself. I no longer needed to be the princess shaped by others' expectations. I could finally be Selene Amaris, the woman who loved, the woman who allowed herself to be true, even if it meant losing everything she knew. And as I looked at Alexander, sitting under the tree where we first met, I felt that even without everything I had lost, I finally had something no one could take from me: my own truth, my love, and the courage to live the life I chose.